biologists, they don't like because they think we planted them in the we built these things in the 1970s. We killed all these units, millions of dollars worth of great bottomland hardwoods, so they're all bad. Now they're not all bad, but we don't need to put them in the annual floodplain. Get them up out of the annual floodplain so that we can get the water off of them, right? And be real careful about how long you put water on them. Don't flood them until after dormancy, and dormancy is when those leaves start turning colors. And you have to get that water off before emergence in the spring, before those buds start popping in the springtime. And that's just hard to do when it's really low. I also hear I've heard some biologists in recent years, anytime that I use the term bottomland hardwood forests, they'll say, oh yeah, green tree reservoirs are good too. They're using the terms green tree reservoir and bottomland hardwood forest synonymously. That's not correct, okay? A green tree reservoir is levied up. It's an artificially impounded bottomland hardwood forest, right? If you've got bottomland hardwood forest in the floodplain, leave them alone. Don't put levees on them. Let the floods come and go, and just let it function. Let it do what it's meant to do, right? Good. Okay. So, how do you manage a green tree reservoir then? Well, first of all, you've got to be sure, like with any of these units, you've got a soil that can hold water. Usually, you want at least an acre of timber that you can flood. No deeper than about 1.5 feet deep. Mass-producing timber is going to be pretty big, 14 to 30 inches diameter, and some of those trees are nice and big. That means you got potential for cavity nesters to come in, like wood ducks. You need a dependable water supply, whether it's the river or groundwater, so that you can pump it. Otherwise, if you're depending on just rainwater or flood water, you can do it, but you might have a whole lot of years, since you're not in the annual floodplain, where it's not flooded at all. So you spend a lot of time and money on something that might not hold water. You can do some harvest of these, like a group selection, small patches, smaller than an acre. Leave your good mass producers, leave a few snags. 80 square foot per basal area is good. Leave a diversity of species, particularly oaks, but a diversity of species. Cypress tupelo aren't as good for waterfowl, but they do have some benefits to waterfowl. So let's review this. What are waterfowl getting out of bottomland hardwood forests or green tree reservoirs besides acorns? Any thoughts, ideas?
Cover.
What's that?
Cover.
Cover, and can you be more specific about that?
Well, I'm thinking like specific about what ducks cover so they can nest.
Just cover in general? Okay. What cover all of the migrating ducks, forget the wood ducks, the migrating ducks that are coming down. I'm thinking of two particular types of cover that is especially useful about bottomland hardwood forests. Overhead cover, okay, so all right, so that's 3. So it gives you good overhead cover, so from avian predation, so from raptors and such, good, okay.
I'm thinking that green patch right there, you can get in there and you can't really see the ducks once they get in that
Right,
grassy.
so both, you can get overhead cover from avian predators and some of the dense shrubby stuff. If you got some button bush and such in there, can give you some not only cover from predation, escape cover, but also thermal cover. We're talking, this is winter habitat, and in winter, thermal cover from high winds and storms. So getting where you have a density of vegetation, you could have some protection from colder weather and the elements. So thermal cover is one. And what's going on late winter in the life history of a duck? Molt, Vales. We're getting close to spring. Tell me about the mating strategies of ducks. Are they polygamous? polygynous, polyandrous, monogamous? Don't know. Ducks form annual pair bonds. Okay, they're annually monogamous. Geese form lifetime pair bonds. Ducks form most ducks, except the whistlers, the tree ducks form annual pair bonds. So what that means is ducks are forming pair bonds in the late winter as they're getting ready to and heading north. Okay. Part of the pair bonding process with ducks is the same as it is with people. You find somebody you like, you kind of need to get a quiet place and spend some time with them, and start that bonding process, right? And that's a whole lot easier to do in forests, in bottomland hardwood forests, where there's trees and cover to hide you from other ducks, right? Than it is in more open habitats. So it's great for thermal cover, even escape cover, but also for pair bonding, okay, for isolation. And there is another important food source besides acorns. Acorns are important and great, but you said molt. And what other great energy expense is about to happen with ducks besides molt this time of year, late winter? Tremendous energy expense. No, I'm not talking about wood ducks. I'm talking about all the others. What are they getting ready to do? Migrate. Yeah, they're getting ready to migrate. Tremendous energy expense, okay? So molt migration, and particularly molt, what do they need following molt that corn is not going to provide? Keratin? Mm-hmm. Something more fundamental than that. Protein. They're going to need protein. Protein is used for enzyme production to build new cells, to grow new feathers. And they're also going to need protein. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Where are they going to get protein from? Acorns gives them a lot of fat, a lot of carbohydrates, some protein. Where are they going to get a bunch more protein from in the forest? Invertebrates. That's right. There are a lot of invertebrates in the leaf litter in the forest floor. Okay, so they're going to be eating a lot of invertebrates, and that's a high value in the forest. There's one more thing that protein is going to provide. Well, not just protein, but that female ducks particularly need this time of year. Calcium for egg production, right? And they're going to get that, some from the exoskeletons of some of these invertebrates. And we have like freshwater shrimp, fingernail clams, that little bitty tiny clams that they eat, that they can get calcium from. Okay, so those are all really important, and you can get a lot of invertebrates from these green tree reservoirs. You can get a lot of invertebrates from moist soil units. Not so much from hot foods. There is one way you can grow hot foods, you can get a little bit more invertebrates. What is it?
Dirty.
Yeah, dirty corn, dirty rice, yeah. Going easy on the herbicides so you get more weeds, right? You don't get as much of your crop, but it diversifies a little bit, right? So these are the cypress tupelo. Those are those lowest associated bottomland hardwood forests right there. Not as good for waterfowl. You don't get the acorns, but you get all that other stuff still. Okay, so I hear you hear some people say that's useless for waterfowl. Not useless. They're not going to. I mean, if they got the choice between this and flooded oaks, they're going to be in the flooded oaks. But if this is all they've got, there is some value. Guys, you don't have to memorize these, but Damon alluded to the fact that some oaks are more water tolerant, and some are more poor soil and dry site tolerant. And this is not all of our oaks in Tennessee, but these are some common ones. So overcup, swamp chestnut, nut all, water willow, pin, cherry bark. These are all oak species that are generally considered moist-loving species, okay? And then you get into species that are not so much aquatic, but white oaks, they like a good, rich, moist soil, not wet, but moist. And then you get into species that are just traditional upland oaks, chestnut oak, southern red, Shumard, black oak. And then you get onto some really poor, high dry sites, oaks that you often find mixed with pines, okay? Like post oak, blackjack oak. You see chestnut oak up there too sometimes. They can handle it really pretty high. So I tell you this not for you to memorize these unless you're just interested, but to understand that when you're talking to a habitat ecologist, they'll often, say things like, you'd expect to see chestnut oaks around here, and that's what they're talking about, just where they are. And that's, we talk so much about wetland management as if it's management for waterfowl, and that's waterfowl has been kind of our, you might think of it as our flagship or our keystone species for wetland management. We manage for waterfowl, hopefully we're taking care of everything else. But that's not always the case. We have dozens of species of waterfowl, but Tennessee's got about 4 dozen species of shorebirds, right? And those guys are a growing concern. Their populations, many of their populations have been declining, and they feed on mudflats, recently exposed mudflats, and on recently flooded areas. Okay, so they migrate earlier. When do most species of ducks make their way down to Tennessee? What month? Around November. That's right. But there's a couple, particularly the blue-winged teal. What? Right now? Yeah, they're coming down in September, even as early as August. That's when a lot of the shorebirds start coming down, like August and September. They're coming down now. So any of you that have been involved in things like skiing on reservoirs or summer fishing on reservoirs, and you hear people, boaters complain about, the drawdown, the agencies that manage our reservoirs drawing the water down early. What they think often, historically, is that the agencies are drawing the water down because they're expecting a lot of rain. So they want there to be plenty of room to capture that rain in the fall, right? As we get closer into the rainy season. But one of the reasons for that early drawdown is because these birds are coming, and in late summer, September, we're talking about the driest part of the year. You've got waters naturally receding, mudflats being exposed, and that's habitat. And if you have those lakes at full pool, then there's no habitat for all these guys coming down, right? So a lot of people complain. They say, well, at least wait till Labor Day, because that's often, what a lot of people consider, for lake recreation, the end of the summer. Keep it at full pool till Labor Day and then drop it, right? These birds don't care about that. They're coming, right? So we need to bring water down for these guys. Labor Day be damned. So that's part of what's going on. But like I said before, historically, we would levy up large units, pump them full of 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet of water, right in November at the beginning of the season, hold it at full pool, and at the end of the duck season, in February, drop it, and you're done. And that's not natural. What we generally have is the rainy season occurring during this time of the year. So we have dry mudflats being exposed, and then those mudflats are starting to be covered, right? And it's actually coming up and down and up and down and up and down. There's more and more during this time, and then dry. So rather than create this artificial flood regime, if we can mimic this natural flood regime, we're providing the natural disturbance that all those species are adapted to, right? It's just harder to do, and it doesn't suit everybody's idea of what's convenient for them for recreation. But these shorebirds, they all have very specific requirements. You've got some with legs this long, and they're adapted to feeding within about 4 inches of the water line. And you've got some with legs this long, and they're adapted to feeding between between 4 and 6 centimeters of water. You've got some with, with legs this long, and they're adapted to feeding several feet away from the water. And they've all got their very specific requirements. So if we just do that, we're not taking care of any of those dozens of species. We try to give them what the flood regime we've always had. We're hopefully taking care of all of them. Good? Okay. So we flood not immediately, but gradually. All right, new areas and new food are continually flooded. That minimizes the opportunity for food to decompose, right? Remember me talking about corn, 60 days underwater and the kernel of corn's lost its nutritional value. Benefits of gradually receding, those exposed mudflats provide invertebrates for upcoming northern migration and egg laying, right? So it happens slowly. And also, if it dries out too quickly, that often provides conditions for our selected invasive species like cocklebur and sicklepod or suspania, which we don't necessarily want. So slowly drying it out brings in those millets and sedges that we're trying to get, right? Varying the timing of floods, the trees recover from long inundation years during other years. Early flooding benefits early migrators such as some teal and shorebirds, mimicking the natural disturbance regime provides for all of them. It's more expensive. You're having to pump water and let it out, pump water, let it out. We don't usually like to let water out, but we can at least pump water a little bit at a time. We might see, there's a forecast that says there's definitely a whole bunch of rain coming. Let's take advantage of that. And maybe we can let some water out, let it drop for a day or two before we get that rain that brings it back up again. What does that look like to you? Just tell me what comes to mind when you look at this picture.
A map?
A map. Yeah, aerial photo. Yeah, okay.
Looks like it.
Looks like there might be a refuge there, maybe. Okay.
Looks like showing different types of plots.
Different types of plots. Given what we're talking about, what do you think those plots are?
Water retention.
Yeah, those are units. Those are either, do they look like, you're talking about at the lower right, the brown ones? Yeah. Are they green tree reservoirs? No, there's no trees. So they could be one of two things. They could either be managed as moist soil or as crop units, right? Okay. What else do you see besides those units?
The river hasn't been channelized.
Yeah, a natural functioning river that hasn't been channelized. You can't really know where the annual floodplain is, can you? You can't really know where would it flood naturally every year. You can figure that this is probably all in the floodplain, right? Is it possible that some of this right here is in the annual floodplain? It could be, and that's not best. In the best world, we would get rid of these things and let that natural floodplain do its thing, restore that natural hydrology of that natural floodplain. Right? Another thing that we're going to be visiting a WMA biologist here with TWRA, I think next week, and I think he'll probably show us some units that he manages. And they've got to think about, when they build these units, they've got to think about things like this. What if, let's say that this is upstream, okay, on the right, and that's downstream on the left. What if you've got your pump from the river or from the ground that pumps into this unit or this unit, and then from that you can fill up this unit, and then from that one you can fill up this one, and then that one, and then that one, for example, right? Well then, in that situation, you can't necessarily control any one of those units independently. If I want to drain this unit, it's got to pass through this unit and that one, right? What if I want to drain both of these units but keep that one full? Or keep this unit full and drain both of those? It makes it very difficult. So in a perfect world, we're able to pump individually into any one unit and drain any one unit individually as well, right, without the others. But that's a lot more expensive, right? You got to lay a lot more pipe. You got to have more water control structures, and You control outflow, and there's a lot more complexity to it. So that's often the balancing act that comes from agencies designing these systems of units. What do you put where, right? It's really nice if it's super flat, because you can have one big unit, that might be 100 acres or more, all right? And at the lower end, it's 18 inches deep, and at the upper end, it's 2 inches deep, and you just pump up the whole thing and you're great, right? But it doesn't provide a lot of diversity. It's pretty uniform, right? And that's not great. So if you have more slope, that kind of forces you to create more levees, because now you've got the rise from 18 inches at the bottom to 2 inches at the top occurs not over 100 acres, but over a half an acre or an acre or a quarter an acre. So just depending on how much slope you had, you might have to create more units, more small units. So these are all considerations. So when you take soil and water surveying, that's the type of information that we apply with logic to designing these programs. So Ducks Unlimited designs a lot of this sort. Okay. What? This is my last slide for this one. There's Gooch WMA and Three Rivers WMA just southwest of us here, where 45 crosses over there. Any observations about this aerial photograph?
A lot of private land. Either looks like plantation or homes.
How do you know that it's private land?
Kind of the way it's sectioned off, and the little white dots, I guess you could say, look like houses to me.
Okay. Is there anything else that might be a clue that some of this is private land?
All the trees are gone.
That's exactly right. The green is forest. The brown is fields. The brown is agriculture. And that's exactly where the boundary is between public and private land. Okay? The green is TWRA, public land. The brown is private land. Now, when people argue that free enterprise will take care of wildlife habitat because wildlife is valuable, so we need to get rid of all the public land, we need to stop acquiring public land is a bad idea, my response to that is no. Free enterprise takes care of the greatest profit, and wildlife is not as profitable right now as corn and beans. And wildlife takes it on the chin. In Tennessee, 90% of the land is private land, right? And there's some good wildlife habitat in the form of private land. But where you have land that's very valuable for row crops, you've got no wildlife habitat unless you buy it or unless you create government programs like CRP, WLP, and stuff. Okay, good.
Why is it called Three Rivers Wildlife Management Area? There's not a river.
Well, this is actually the O'Brien River right here, and the Rutherford Fork comes together right here, and the North Fork come together right here. So I think it's called Three Rivers because you've got these three forks of the O'Brien coming together just above it.
It looks like a road.
What's that?
I said it looks like a road.
It does. It's a river. It's the O'Brien. It looks like a road because it's been channelized. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that is my last. And speaking of channelization, I talked about when you channelize a river and put the spoil piles on either side, and it rains and the runoff water comes, instead of just falling into the river like it naturally would, you get this, right? And initially you might think, well, hey, that looks like a beaver pond. It looks like great wood duck habitat and woodpecker habitat, and for a few years it is, right? But if this were a beaver pond, after a few years, the food resource would be gone and the beavers would go somewhere else and build a new pond. The dam would eventually breach and this would drain and turn back into bottomland hardwood forest again. But where we have maintained spoil piles on the bank of the river that keeps that there, this just gets worse and worse. So you have things like Crockett bottoms and many other places in West Tennessee that are just eutrophied, dead, useless habitat, non-habitat for wildlife. Damn it, last one. Okay. Who's heard of Lee Fredrickson? Okay, Lee Fredrickson he's old now. I don't know. He's probably up in his 80s, maybe 70s. Lee Frederickson is the king, the godfather of wetland management for waterfowl in North America. Okay, if you want to know one name for wetland management for waterfowl in North America, this is the guy. He's a retired professor. He still operates out of the Gaylord Lab in Missouri. Has led so much research, published hundreds of papers with all sorts of people. And he has given hundreds of wetland management workshops for waterfowl all over the United States. But one thing that he very frequently says, and he came and spoke to our student chapter of the Wildlife Society once upon a time, and he said at the end 3 things, and this is something that he often says at the end of his talk, 3 last pieces of advice. He says, biologists, managers, listen to your technicians. Listen to your field technicians, because they're the ones that are out there every day. You gotta be loving this. Every day, living in it. They have boots in the mud and know what's going on out there. They can tell you critically important, insightful things. Listen to your staff. Do not undervalue your staff. Number 2, he said, when you have a public land where you're managing for waterfowl, it might be that up at the front you don't have good waterfowl habitat. The waterfowl habitat's all in the back, a couple miles behind the gate. Just create a unit somewhere visible from up front and pump some water in there. Keep water visible just to make people happy. Okay? If sometimes you can pacify people by making your area conform visually to some degree with what their expectations of the area should be. Okay? Now, you could argue this. Well, shouldn't you just educate the public about proper habitat? Well, yeah, that too. But just compromise can get you a long way. And his last thing was, duck hunters want corn. We can educate them till the cows come home about how corn alone won't save duck populations. But even while you do that, just let them see some corn, make them happy. But put some corn at the gate, with some water, and a lot of the time, just that makes people feel that you really care. You're hearing them. You're trying to do good stuff. Good.